Hello, I'm Ozzie Ostwalt. Welcome to AppTV's Religion in Life. This week, are college students losing their religion? Young adults away from home for the first time face many challenges to their religious beliefs. Here to help us understand how college students and religion interact are Chris Horn of the Reformed University Fellowship, Brad Farrington of Appalachian's Wesley Foundation, and Emily Rivers, a religious studies major here at Appalachian State. Thank you all for coming and welcome. So one of the great things about being on the college campus, me in my role as a teacher and you as campus ministers and Emily as a student, is we get to interact with these wonderful young adults known as college students. And they come to us full of ideas and idealism and independence, but sometimes also conflict and confusion. And I would imagine this is where you interact with a lot of our college students. So Chris and Brad, could you just tell me a little bit about how students come to your ministries, how you interact with them, the sorts of ways that you interact with students and the problems and talents and ideals that they bring to college?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge opportunity, obviously. I mean, students are why you do this job, because they're exciting, they're at a place in their life where they're asking a lot of questions, and they're really, transferring from adolescence to adulthood. And so it's just a really exciting time to be part of their lives. For me, we interact as a ministry with students as a gathering of students that are coming together to learn about the Bible and Jesus. But what's really refreshing for me is one-on-one, sort of more pastoral counseling situations with students, just hearing their background and excited about all the different kinds of backgrounds that they come from and the ways that they change and grow, usually for the better in college.
So we've got this graphic about campus ministry in general, and I think a lot of what you've said captures the idea that you're really dealing with at several different levels with the students, on a faith level and an intellectual level and whatnot. So here we have campus ministry, community, faith, social justice. These are three of the sorts of ideals that would bring students to you. How about you, Brad? Same kind of interaction with and experience with our students?
We do. Since we're the United Methodist Campus Ministry at App State, we get a lot of folks that come in from local churches, local United Methodist churches. But then we also have a lot of folks who are just coming to our campus ministry because students follow students wherever they go. And when there's a buzz and excitement about something happening within campus ministry, I think that's for us all. That's where they come in. And really, they come into our campus ministry not really knowing what to expect. I think there's a lot of folks who come out of a local church looking for a continuation of the youth ministry that they experienced. And one of the things that we try to encourage, as Chris said, is welcoming them into adulthood and young adulthood. Instead of being chapter 13 of youth ministry, of welcoming into young adult ministry and empowering them and nurturing them and letting them have ownership over our campus ministry. Because for the most part, we're student-run ministries. We are, as campus ministry staff, are there to undergird and support, but 100% of our leadership are students.
And I'm glad you mentioned that the Wesley Foundation is connected to the Methodist Church largely. A lot of people wouldn't make that connection. And Chris, the Reformed University Fellowship, I'm assuming that's Presbyterian and related denominations.
It's Presbyterian. Presbyterian Church in America's campus ministry.
Do you all have any idea of how many different traditions or denominations are represented across campus ministries on campus?
In terms of the campus ministries or the students that are involved?
In terms of the various campus ministries themselves. I know we have Hillel Foundation, for example, the Catholic campus ministries. I'm just wondering what the overall presence is.
We have Appalachian Spiritual Life Association that represents all campus ministries that have professional staff, and we gather together typically about once a month. And in that gathering, I would say there's about 15 to 18 different groups represented, and interdenominationally and across faith traditions as well, that have professional staff. And that doesn't include numerous student organizations that aren't supported by professional staff.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of them are evangelical, but there are all kinds of other different kinds of groups.
And I would guess that reflects the student constitution, constitution of the student body, it being in the South and being in the western part of North Carolina. Well, since we're talking about students primarily. I want to get Emily in on the conversation. Emily, you're one of our religious studies majors,
Yes.
and I want to come back to that a little later, but could you reflect just a little bit on when you first came to Appalachian? Were you searching for a campus ministry to plug into, or did you happen onto these folks? Happenstance?
Yeah, I came to Appalachian as a transfer student, and I knew right away that I wanted to become involved in some sort of campus ministry. I was affiliated with a Methodist church back at home, and so had that tie, but was still open to any sort of ministry. I tried a few out. I was approached individually from students who went to the Appalachian State Wesley Foundation, and that's how I got plugged into there. And
You'd be surprised.
that's how I was able to do that.
Okay. And you coming as a transfer student, I heard these fellows talking earlier that you were automatically kind of tapped as a leader because you had a little more maturity, a little older. But what do you think about, say, a first-year student, 18 years old, first time away from home, perhaps? Is that the typical profile of someone who would show up at a campus ministry, or is it a little later in the experience that they find their way to the...
I think it's really dependent on the individual. I mean, you enter college with so many different opportunities for so many different experiences, and students get involved with many different things, with sports, with different clubs, and hopefully they're searching for something for a spiritual fulfillment as well. But I think it's really different. It depends on your environment, depends on the friends that you're hanging out with. If you see students going to campus ministries and you think, I want to be a part of that. But you have to pursue it. It's not something that you have to find for yourself.
Yeah, I was reading some articles in preparation for this show, and there was apparently a survey done recently that suggested that over 3/4 of college students are actually wanting to develop a spiritual life. They perhaps don't know how, but they're actively seeking to develop themselves spiritually.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I mean, this is the first time typically students are away from home and they are given the opportunity of freedom to express their own beliefs. Maybe it's in line with what they've been taught at home. Maybe they haven't had the opportunity to be surrounded by that at home. So they're searching for new things in many different areas.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, students being away from home at the first time. Another survey I read suggested, well, the title was, "Are Students Losing Their Religion in College?" And the survey suggested that the class of 2018 is the least likely of any class of entering freshmen to identify with a particular religious group over the past 40 years, which is a pretty telling statistic, I think.
Sure.
Do you all feel that when students make their way to your groups that they perhaps have less of an identification with a religion, or are searching more? Or?
Well, I think most freshmen, first-year students that come in, that they find the ministry right away. They come in looking for the ministry. They come from a Christian background, and they do want to perpetuate their youth group or church experience from home. But by the second semester, sophomore year, and into junior year, that's when you start to get students that are asking questions for the first time and seeking answers. But yeah, I mean, the majority, I think, even of those Christian kids that would self-identify when they come in as Christians, very quickly, at least half of them, you just don't see them anymore. They quickly disperse, and there's other things that can catch their attention, because really that was just the environment they were in growing up. And after half a semester, there's more interesting things for them.
Well, that's interesting, because another survey I read suggested that about 60% of entering college students are very active in their religion before they come to college. That dwindles to about 30% by the junior year. So there is a kind of falling away from. I'm wondering if that is only for college students, or if it's just in part at least a factor of the age. I mean, these are young adults coming into their own, whether they're in college or not. Is there a sense at which this would be a natural progression with or without the college experience?
I don't think it's connected to college. Right. I think it's connected to a generation. I mean, Pew's done some research recently, and this generation of millennials, people who were born in the early 90s, mid 90s, I think they are the least interested in being a part of an organized religion. the bracket that they are seeing growing are the people that are religiously non-affiliated, and that doesn't include people that aren't spiritually interested and people who are fascinated, but they just want to de-affiliate with any kind of organization, institution. And I think that's what we're seeing is this generation is disconnecting from organized religion, but they're still spiritually very, very curious.
Yeah, and they like to disengage from labels in general. It's not just a religious thing. I think there's a sense that there's a lot of, it's like being on the cereal aisle. There's so many options. There's a fear of choosing the wrong thing and identifying yourself as that and then having to go back later and make changes. And so I think in the religious realm, it's there, but students are very wary to attach a label to themselves in most arenas. They don't want to declare a major right away, all these things. I think there's just a sense of being overwhelmed with the number of options there are and not wanting to choose the wrong thing. I mean, it's baseline fear.
So you don't want to show up on campus first day identified as a Baptist economics major from North Carolina. So there's a tendency to get away from labels.
Right.
Does that sound familiar, Emily? You're the one amongst us who's closest to that experience.
Yeah, I do think the people who I'm surrounded with on campus, other students, don't want to be labeled, don't want to be confined to a certain box. Other factors I think would contribute to this is just the pace of life in general. I think that people are bombarded with a lot of responsibilities, and sometimes there tends to be a hierarchy of importance to things that maybe isn't the right way that we should do things, but happens very frequently, I think.
While I've got your attention here, let me ask you a question as a religious studies major. Some of my students come to me and they say, well, my minister back home warned me about taking a religion class at a secular university, that it would somehow diminish or destroy faith. Now, granted, classes in a secular university on religion follow a different model. They're taught from a religious studies perspective rather than a devotional or faith perspective. So I understand where that concern is coming from. But you came here, I think, as not only a person of faith, but also as a religious studies major. So could you reflect a little bit on the kind of experience you had the first time you stepped into a college
Yeah,
classroom?
definitely. I stepped into a full load of religious studies classes, very centered on philosophy and the science of religion. And I mean, to be honest, it shook me quite a bit at first. And I would leave class, go outside, and not know what I believed or what I thought. But I think keeping that foundation, being involved in a campus ministry to talk about those different doubts or thoughts that I had was essential. Overall, I think it's deepened my faith. I think it's allowed me to question things that are important to think about. I think it can be really hard for some people who maybe have a difficult time being open-minded and understanding the concept of being open-minded, because I think you can be open-minded and listen to what other people have to say, listen to other viewpoints without having to identify with those views.
So critical reflection on religion alone doesn't necessarily mean that a student's going to lose their perspective on their faith.
Think so.
It could actually lead, in your case, you say, to a deepening of faith.
I think so, because I think it forces you in a way to become uncomfortable, to think about things that maybe you have not had to question before. Maybe you've come from a conservative church background and you haven't been exposed to these different ways of life. And, I think it's a gift to be able to learn and, spread your knowledge out in that way.
So do you guys ever run into the student who comes to you in a panic saying, oh no, what I'm learning in my religion class is hurting my faith, or I don't want to go back, or you've heard that before?
So the Wesley Foundation has the privilege of having a facility basically on campus, right on the backside of Howard Street. And sometimes I get students who are not connected with our campus ministry just come in off the street. They just kind of see the sign and they come into my office and they are literally weeping because in their Old Testament class, someone shared about the two creation stories within Genesis, and that has absolutely rattled their theology, rattled their faith, and they don't know how to match up with what they've learned growing up and what they just learned in the class. And it truly can be disenfranchising for students who haven't been given a little bit more wherewithal about how to navigate through some things, or have been tested with people that really disagree with what they've been brought up with. And so I think there's a certain amount of grit, spiritual grit, that I'm seeing lessened within kind of this generation. Any opposition, it's easier just to drop it all and forget it. They don't know how to navigate through difficult topics.
And I would imagine that this kind of dynamic, it's not just with religion classes, it might be across the board. Part of the college experience is opening students up to areas of knowledge and information that they haven't been exposed to in the past, teaching them to critically reflect upon the values that they hold. So I would guess that these sorts of crises, if you want to call it that, would not only be in the area of religion, but perhaps in other areas of their growing up and maturation.
And I think that's the beautiful thing about being a ministry that's for campus, and not just another local church that serves a variety of demographics and generations, but to be really focused with college students, because that's our everyday, that's our constant conversations. And we welcome that. We want to walk with students and to have a community of students that has engaging conversations and doubts and revelations and convictions and wonderings, and I think that when you go through this stage of life together, it's much more beautiful than feeling like you're isolated, or the questions and doubts or convictions that you're embracing where you just feel alone. And I think isolation is an epidemic on campus that we're trying to fight.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, the opportunity, it's a great opportunity. Someone comes to one of us with those questions, I think we have a sense of, okay, this is why we get to be here. This is the privilege of being here. And that is the beginning of really healthy, good conversation, where you're no longer, as a religious person, especially as an evangelical Southern Christian person, in defense mode, where I have to protect this thing that is in here, but I get to engage it in a community of other people where they think differently, and you come out, I think, like Emily, with a more robust experience. You can, of your faith, if you are allowed to, I know it's something that Brad's ministry and mine both want to create an opportunity for people to process at their own speed and not have to arrive somewhere, but they're allowed to come in and process these truth claims, what are they hearing in class, and do that naturally. And I don't think a lot of students have had that growing up, that opportunity to process.
And I would say too, is that students are looking for certainty. And they're growing up in an environment where I'm right, you're wrong, you're right, I'm wrong. And there's no space in the middle for conversation, for mystery. And I think if there's any beautiful thing about our faith as Christians, is that we fully embrace mystery, where we don't have to have right and wrong. But I think that's the perspective that a lot of students look at campus ministries as continuing the I'm right, you're wrong, instead of like, let's welcome and let's dwell in this mystery and journey together, instead of trying to find an immediate destination of faith.
Well, I've often thought that if students and adults in general can learn to think critically about religion, then they can learn to think critically about anything. It seems to be a very difficult topic to enter into critical examination of, particularly when it's your own tradition. Well, those are great stories. It sounds like a lot of what you do is counseling as well. I'm wondering if there's any sort of special training you go through, and I know Emily's considering a vocation centered on religious counseling in the future, so she might end up as a campus minister down the road somewhere. Let me ask you this. I know oftentimes when students go to a college campus, part of the experience is to be opened up to different worldviews, different ways of viewing the world, not just in religion, but in every area of life. But certainly, many students are probably exposed to the concept of there being global religions or world religions for the first time, maybe the first time they've heard about Hinduism or Buddhism. So there's a lot of diversity on campus, I think, when it comes to religion. We have a graphic that I like, showing students in caps and gowns with different religious symbols on the caps. Does that enter into your work at all? Here we go. So we've got a representation of various religious faiths on campus. Does the idea of introducing students to diversity amongst religions enter into your work? Is there a sense in which campus ministries, and I know, Emily, I want to talk to you about this as well in the religion classroom, but is there a sense in which campus ministries open students up to a greater sense of religious worldviews around them that may not be their own?
Yeah, I think just helping students to get beyond the fear of interacting with another religion is huge. You know, so a mantra in RUF that I'm always talking about and reminding myself is that God is at work, whether we're there or not, whether we think that He's at work or not. And so just to have that mantra, understand I can engage with somebody else and be open to what's going on with them, learn about them as an individual, and not be afraid. I think the fear and the insecurity of I'm going to walk into a situation and not know is really difficult. And so I see it as part of our privilege to be able to break that down a little bit and give them just the confidence, not that they know all the answers, but that they can interact with someone and God's still going to be at work.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I guess on our campus, we're perhaps not as diverse as some other campuses, so that might not be as much of an issue. But hopefully there are some opportunities for students to interact with students whose worldviews are completely different.
Yeah, I'm always interested in facilitating those opportunities, and it's kind of difficult to navigate. I think students they don't like the labels, but in some ways they're more ideologically separated than ever, and so they don't even think about the option of doing something together. I don't know how you feel about it, but
Well, I think one of the things that I've always approached is saying, seek truth. You know, I mean, this is a time where you're discovering what is true, you know, what is valuable to you, and to see value and truth in other people, even if they're coming from a different perspective, a different faith tradition, a different upbringing, because we have a lot of diversity in other ways on campus. I think we're not a diverse campus, but there's a lot of diversity, especially in socioeconomic backgrounds, and those stories and those upbringings beyond religious, I think, are just really beautiful. And in that, there's truth. And I think that I believe that God is a God of truth, and that the more we encounter trueness that everyone carries, that we come closer to God.
sure.
So, Emily, did somewhere along the way you have a class on global religions or world religions that introduced you to a wide sense of the diversity amongst
definitely.
religions?
I've taken a world religions class. I've taken a Buddhism class. I'm in a Christianity class. I think that there's real value in being able to look at world religions, but also in the classroom being able to sit beside someone who has a different religion than I am, or has or chooses not to affiliate with religious faith, or claims something else. So I think the classroom itself is really neat to be at a secular university and study religion in that way, beside people from all different backgrounds, kind of looking at it from an outside perspective.
So one of the common themes here, it seems to me, is that this time in one's life, when you're a college student, you're sort of right in the middle of breaking away from home, becoming fully independent, making up your mind about what you believe, not what your parents believe or what your tradition has taught you. Do you consciously feel yourself in the middle of all this? Is it something you reflect upon?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just college, I think in general, I think this age that a typical college student is at has a lot of formation. There's a lot of experiences that you go through within your faith, within your own beliefs, within the career you want to maybe pursue, within relationships. There's just a lot that goes into it. And so I think, it can be great. It can be overwhelming. And it's just a lot that you're thinking about at this time.
If there's one thing that you could tell me as your professor to keep in mind when I'm dealing with students at your place in life in order to perhaps be a better teacher or a more sensitive teacher when you're dealing with topics that are so important to students, what would that be? I know it's hard to tell your teacher how to be a better teacher.
I think just the fact that we're confused, we don't know exactly, we're going to make mistakes, and we're still trying to figure everything out. I think patience and grace goes a long way with anybody, but I think especially during this time when college students are really just overwhelmed with a lot of things, trying to balance financial issues with family life and relationships and the religious beliefs. So, patience.
Patience, okay. And in a word, maybe you could add a word to describe your biggest challenge in dealing with students at this stage in their lives.
Isolation.
Isolation.
Brad said, yep.
Being comfortable in their own skin, identity, and I would say also vocation. I think that's a huge struggle for
Yeah.
people. They are so scared of picking a major. They're so scared of locking themselves in for a career path, and I think that there's a lot of stress and anxiety that revolves around vocation.
And of course, the structure of college and getting students through on time probably doesn't help, because there's a lot of pressure to make
Sure.
those decisions, perhaps at a point when students aren't ready. Well, you know, every day I come to work, I think we're quite privileged to work with this community of students and faculty and campus ministers, staff and administrators, and of course, religion being one of the more important aspects of one's personal life. I feel privileged to be able to be in the classroom with that, and I thank you all for coming on today to remind me of the other part of students' interaction with religion, and appreciate your work on campus ministries, and always thanking students like Emily, who are a pleasure to teach and interact with. So that's Religion and Life for this week. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions, please contact us at watchapptv.com. Until next time, I'm Ozzie Ostwalt.